Hey everybody, welcome to Untether.tv. I'm your host and founder, Rob Woodbridge. Do I have to keep reminding you about why you come here? We are talking to the folks, the guys and the gals, the entrepreneurs in the mobile space that are paving the way for us. They're building these products that we don't even know that we need, but we will one day. We're also talking to the guys who are pioneering new technology, moving old technology into new technology, educating our kids, and that's what we're doing here today. We're also interviewing an Ottawa guy. So, of course, this is going to be one of the best interviews that you've ever heard, simply because two Ottawa guys join. Very proud of our local tech scene, our local mobile scene. So I try to highlight that as often as I can. And it is relevant. It is relevant to all of Canada. It is relevant to all of you guys around the world who may be watching this. And to my mother. Hi, Mom. I have Steve Davis here, who's the CTO for Skyreader Media. They are a creator of interactive mobile apps for the iPad. Now, here's the reason. It's really cool. We're going to talk a little bit about this as well. They recently transformed author Leslie McGurk's book, Pip the Penguin, into a children's interactive book for the iPad that shot up to #1 in the App Store in the children's books section in Canada. So we are going to dive into that without further ado. Here is Steve. Steve, thanks for doing this, man. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no problems. It's a pleasure.
So Steve and I know each other from the mobile community, so this is going to be a very familiar conversation. I know a little bit about this company, so full caveat. I'm very excited about what these guys are doing. The growth is insane. You guys have you've been pushing out apps like it's going out of style. How many have you pushed out in a short period of time now?
We've got about 20 plus iPad apps going. We got 6 of them moving onto the iPhone now, and Pip the Penguin is our latest and greatest app that's gone out for the iPad, and we'll have that out for the iPhone.
Where does, I mean, it's incredible because it's such a compressed time period that you guys have done this. So what is Skyreader? I know that it's Toronto based, but what is Skyreader Media? Where does it come from? How long have you guys been around for?
So Skyreader itself has been around for probably 2 years. It's a joint effort between a group in Toronto, Skyreader Media, which is a company that's been in the children's television space for quite a long period of time, 10 or 15 years. And they got together with a group in Ottawa called Backyard Studio. And Backyard had developed a children's app, children's ebook app for the iPad. But was really looking for, they had the core tech, they were looking for content. So they went to Skyreader, who was involved with children's animated content, and they decided to get together and they created Skyreader. That was probably February last year. I joined them in August. We started pushing books out about that time frame. So from August last year to now, we've produced the 20 plus books. The goal was to produce actually a lot more than that, but we've focused on creating tools to allow us to build books faster. And in doing so, we didn't build books as fast, but we're hoping that we'll eventually get there.
Isn't that funny though? Because I mean, I've heard that so many times. Is that I ran a mobile game company here in Ottawa called Magmic, and we were building tools to facilitate the game development process getting faster, all the asset compilation and porting, which we did a lot of back then in the feature phone days. And, we spent, I would hazard a guess, $500,000 building these tools out to speed things up. And then we had to reteach everybody how to do it. It was a productivity sucker for so long because we split our resources. Obviously but eventually it ends up being a gain. Is that what you guys anticipate? I hope.
Well, and yeah, in fact, one of the things that happened when I came on board in August is we kind of rechanged our focus, and the focus was originally to just produce a lot of books. So the whole long tail publishing, where if you create thousands of books and you sell thousands of copies of each book, you're spreading your effort and you're spreading the risk across all these books. You don't have to produce one and sell 1 million. And it was a great idea, but obviously you don't want to be spending 2 months on every book to try to produce 1,000 books. You have to get your time down. So we're still producing those books, but what we've decided to do as well is we're actually looking at that tool that we're developing now as a potential product that we can take to market. And so we're starting to talk to publishers. We're we're imminently going to beta on that tool, and we're going to be putting that in people's hands to use that tool. Again, hoping to get that into the publisher's hands to let them to produce more, again, more and more books.
But I mean, you've been prolific since you came on, because it's been less than a year. You're putting out 20 products. When you took this role as CTO, what was it that was appealing to this? Because there are a lot of companies out there that are playing in the children's book space. Not the least of which Disney, and every other big publisher of children's books. So what was it about? Skyreader? What was it about what you saw that really attracted you to them?
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's an interesting question. I mean, the fact that it's local, Ottawa based, is actually an interesting story. I mean, I went in and talked to one of the investors in Skyreader, not knowing about Skyreader, and I went in and pitched him on the concept of getting into children's books. And he was sitting there the whole time with a grin on his face, and I really couldn't figure out why. And basically said, well, look, I've already got a company that was trying to get into this. Would you like to get involved with that company? So it was actually a very synergistic conversation. So instead of now going out and competing, we joined forces, and we're able to take that story forward. And just the concept that the nice thing is they're well backed.
Yeah, it helps when they're well backed. But I mean, what was it about children's books that you saw that what was missing in the market that you said, listen, I got to get into this space? Because I mean, you were looking at building an app company, an app development company, and there must have have been something that you just kind of looked at and said, okay, that's definitely where I need to be.
Well, it was interesting. We I've got kids, and at the end of the day, you're always, you're saying, well, I can build apps, I can build, should I get into games? What do I want to do? And the concept of taking books and taking them to the next level, and this is what we're trying to do at Skyreader, is to say, well, the book isn't just a flat experience anymore. It's not passive. It's not just about sitting there and having the book read to you or sitting there and reading the book. It's about interacting and moving the story forward through the actions and even potentially teaching. That makes it very, very satisfying. And yeah, as much as I'd like to be develop the next Halo or the next big success on the Xbox, the children's books are accessible, and it appeals to me as a father and everything else. So it actually was a very unique thing to do.
So there must have been an opportunity that you saw somewhere along the lines. You're a father, I'm a father. What was it? It's a very competitive space when it comes to wanting to build these interactive games for children. And there's also a credibility gap or issue around this as well when you're talking about educating your kids. So what was it in the space that drew you in? It just seems rife with challenges. Maybe that.
Well, there was a number of things that drew us in. I mean, we took a look at what was already in the market, and they were very, very simple experiences. You'd reach in, you'd touch something, it would respond, but it would respond in the same way every time. And we noticed that the ebooks were very passive. And I keep using this quote, and I honestly can't remember where it came from. I'd love to know, but we're trying to turn the books from a lean back experience to a lean forward experience. Now, we want the child to be engaged. And what we were finding is everything that was coming out was very, very passive. And by adding these read to me modes, the child could watch the book. And there was no incentive for the child to interact with the book at all. And so we sort of flipped that around. We say we want the child to become part of the book. And especially like if you look at Draw Long Pip, literally the child has to draw the book in order to start the story along. So you draw Pip, the story starts. Now you have to, who's that hiding in the cupboard? Now you have to draw the cupboard, and you have to open the cupboard, and you have to interact with it. And it makes the child engage. And so we've set a challenge to our creators. So we have an entire group of illustrators and animators, an art director. We have basically creative talent that are responsible for the books. And we've raised the bar. We've said, okay, now what we want the book to be interactive, not just lazy interactive, but actually interactive and immersive, and let's try to teach the children something. Teach them to count, teach them they don't want to have to learn, like, they don't want to know they're learning, but let's help them learn. And definitely there's books out there that are coming along that are doing this. But for the most part, if you look into the Kindle, you look into the iBooks, the formats that are inside the traditional ebook readers don't support it, so you have to go to an app. And when you get into the app, you've got companies that are doing interesting things, but you also have companies that are being very lazy about it. And we decided to be a company that is going to try to raise the bar and make it a very, very interesting experience.
Well, it's so obvious that this way of learning, is going to push back the way that we learned growing up. Interactivity to us was putting a cassette in the recorder and putting headphones on and listening to it in class. Interactivity was a conversation around the book, which is very important. But obviously, mobile technology and the technology that is now the tablet has just put education at the forefront. It allows for, as you said, that lean forward experience, this seamless learning. Almost kind of like tricking your kids into learn because it's a game, right? This is the ultimate gamifying of books, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, we've been, one of the challenges we have, and this is more from a marketing perspective than from a company directions perspective, is I don't want to make the books seem too game-like, right? Because then they look at them as compared to games, and they're not games, they're still books. And, we're coming at it from a couple of different directions. We have a lot of relationships with publishers now. We have 7,000 books that we've licensed from publishers that are already in print. And for those, you're starting from a very linear experience. The book is there, and you've got to follow the story. But with, you talked about Leslie McGurk before, and she is an award-winning author, and we've got a relationship with her now where she's essentially our author in residence. Everything she produces now we'll then take and turn into an ebook. We're going back and doing all of her existing works. But the nice thing about working with an author up front is that we can look at that interactive experience and that even a non-linear experience and address it from the very beginning, and make sure that the story can respond to the experience we're trying to bring the child to. And as you mentioned with the mobile, it's funny going into this. You say, well, we're going to talk about ebooks and mobile, and I go, well, you know what? Books are already mobile. That part, it's not about mobile, but the interactivity that the tablet and the phone bring gives you that combination of the ability of the power of a PC and the power of interactivity and the ability to the computing and everything else with that mobility. So now it's happening in the backseat of the car while you're driving to the grocery store, or it's at the restaurant while you're waiting for dinner, and the child can get pulled right into the book. And you can again teach them in a way that they don't even realize.
Well, it's so funny because I remember this great Amazon commercial. It was a print commercial that said, "Now, books, you can take them with you wherever you go." And I thought, you already could, right? It's like
that's right.
The thing about books is that they, it was funny, but you're right. And what about this thing? Everybody comes down on these tablets. All these reports that were coming out these days where it says your kid gets into a trance-like state when you put an iPad in front of them or a tablet in front of them, is that it's brain dumbing, it's dead. These are the kind of things that we're hearing around what's happening with the children in these tablets. But because I've done it, I mean, we've been in a restaurant and I've handed my kids the tablet, and it's only to kind of calm them. But it's education that we're putting in there. It's games, it's books, it's things that they're doing interactive learning. But the frowns and the looks of absolute disdain as people walk by saying, "Oh my God, you can't entertain your kids. You can't have a conversation with your kids." What do we say to those people that when really this is a different learning experience from the ground up than anybody has ever experienced prior to this?
Well, it's also about the content. I mean, you're right. If you give them a tablet and you put Harry Potter on it and they're just watching the video, well, absolutely, it is not that Harry Potter's mind numbing, but it is a very, very passive experience. They sit back and they're now just, it's the same as watching TV, and it's not any different than watching TV. And the same people that and I'm the same. I don't like to have my child sitting in front of the TV for hours, and I wouldn't want to have him watching YouTube videos for hours. But the benefit of having an interactive book, and especially if it's intentionally interactive, where the child has to actually do things to progress the story, then they don't have a choice but to be interactive. And you read about this. Video games are bad for one in one aspect in terms of consuming hours and hours of kids' time. But there's lots of studies that have shown that video games are very good for hand-eye coordination and for focus and problem solving, and that's what the iPad brings to you in a much more mobile environment. It doesn't have to be a game. It doesn't have to be a Call of Duty war game. It can be a a lovely children's book that everybody's happy with, and is, you know, teaching a nice story, and it targeted all different ages, and that's the
Well,
beauty
you
of
must have. I want to move into a little bit of a different area because it's around numbers and it's around how you're marketing these and the lessons that you've learned around developing and deploying apps like this. Because you know, this is. I don't think that there is a blueprint for this kind of stuff. And that's a transition that we're going through right now. Is we're trying to determine what the best way is to use these tools. But first of all, you know, we talked about this before. We use Leslie McGurk and the brand of Leslie McGurk in order to be able to push out Pip the Penguin on the iPad. Tell me about that process. You know, it's hard to market apps, because the long tail is a long tail. You know, 1 million+ apps across all these platforms. It's very difficult to get noticed. So what was the strategy around Leslie? Did she approach you? Did you guys approach them or her? I mean, what was that about?
We, you know, to be honest, the relationship with Leslie was in place when I started with the company. But essentially, Leslie and our CEO, Kevin Gillis, go back a long way. They've known each other for a while. Kevin's been in the children's television industry for a long time. They have relationships on the TV and the film side. But we actually approached her and said, look, we'd like to make you our author in residence, and we'd like you to produce books just for us. And in that way, it's very much a publisher type relationship. But you know, to a certain extent, what we've done is we've tied ourselves to her tail and said, look, you know, we're going to leverage your brand to help build our brand. And you know, what we've realized is that by, you know, if our goal really is to produce thousands of books, we can't be marketing each individual title. We just don't have the capacity to throw traditional marketing dollars after every title. So we have to build brand, and we have to get Skyreader known as a children's book brand, or an ebook brand that you want to go to get good children's books. So Leslie's helping us do that. So by, you know, helping, you know, building her brand into the electronic market, into the digital market where she isn't, we're now building our own profile, and we're helping each other in that environment. But you know, you talk about, you know, how do you get your app noticed? There's no magic, right? Everybody, you know, you go into this and you know, I've talked to a lot of young developers that'll say, well, if I could just get on that staff pick list. It's like, seriously, you're going to build your entire business plan around that? You know,
I know.
Don't bother. You have to. There's no magic, and you know, I've seen reports coming out, and they just keep coming out saying, you know, the companies that are successful in this market are spending 30% of their build dollars on marketing, and that's, you know, that's pretty normal, right? You have to do the traditional stuff, but you know, we've learned a lot with Pip and with the other books. Like, for example, banner ads really aren't that useful in marketing apps, because at the end of the day, when I'm sitting on my computer and I see a banner ad, it's not like I can click through and buy that app, right? I want something that takes me from the phone or from the tablet into the app. And you know, so for example, we're pushing out some advertising on an iPad magazine starting in June. So the instantaneous of that, so you're in the iPad, you see the magazine, you see the ad for Pip. Okay, now if I click on that, I can actually buy it. You need that. You don't want a lot of steps. And again, this is just marketing 101. Every time you have to click another link, you lose half your audience or more, right? So what we've realized is you got to spend money to make money. And yeah, every once in a while there's going to be these overnight successes, but for the most part, it's hard work. And you know, we've spent the last 2 or 3 months building up our social network. So Leslie has her Facebook linked to the Skyreader Facebook, and we've got our Twitter feeds, and you know, we're leveraging the social media to try to build our fan base. And again, it's all about getting eyeballs. And now that we've got apps in the market, each app co-sells, you know, others of our apps, right? So they just did everything.
At what point?
But
you know, it's funny because certainly I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I've interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs who have come up and said, listen, you know, they've got one app in the market, and they weren't going to launch another app for perhaps you know, based on resources, maybe 3, 4, 5 months down the road. And that time is killer, isn't it? Between those apps, like what you did since last September is release 20 apps in that compressed time frame, and and that's a strong way to create I don't even know waves when it comes to this, but launching one every 6 months really doesn't do you any good because you're losing the momentum of one before you release the other one. So at some point there's got to be some kind of overlap. Is that what your thinking is around the release schedule? Because it's pretty aggressive what you guys have done.
Well, absolutely, and it's going to get more aggressive because we really have partitioned our work now into two different flavors. We've got the book apps, which will continue to come out multiple books per month after our tool's done, and PIP, which is what we call a full custom app, which is one we spend a lot more of our internal resources on. But we intend to release an app like PIP every month, and you absolutely. I mean, we're seeing that the peak of an app being sold is right on the order of weeks, and you have to then have another event and another event and another event. And if you look at what we did with PIP, there's 6 PIP books, and we've released the first one. The other 2 are going to come out as updates to the first app, and then we'll bring out a second app with the other 3 books in it, so we can get again 3 kicks at that. And so those will all come out over the next 4 or 5 months, depending on the time frame. But you have to constantly be kicking the app, and it just builds on it, builds on it, and builds on it. Yeah, if you wait for too long, your audience has gone down, people forget about it, they've deleted the app off their iPad, and you have to stay in their face. And there's a fine line, right, between irritating your audience and being able to constantly get out there. In fact, what we're looking at now from our books is actually creating a bookshelf app, as opposed to having now 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 apps on your iPad that are children's books that have been created by Skyreader. We'll have a single app that that contain all of our books, and that way you're not, in terms of an update, it's coming down when you need it. We're not issuing updates through the App Store. You're not having to update 20 apps every time we find a small bug in our reader or every time we upgrade something. So. But yeah, it's always about getting in people's faces.
Yeah, I mean, there is something there to be said about not getting in their face too often. There's a fine balance there, but you don't want to lose your customer base. And as you were saying, you've learned some lessons around how to market these things. You must have used, having somebody with a brand recognition and an established following, like an author, like Leslie, and the fact that you've got, she's got a brand around the product, Pip, the penguin. How much did that help you guys in distributing this, or did it, or didn't it? Did it help with a pop for Pip? That's terrible, but you know what I mean? Oh.
Yeah, it didn't. I mean, yeah, Leslie has a huge, she has a following, and it did help, and we leveraged her mailing list, and she knows a lot of people, so we were able to leverage that as much as possible. With San Diego Zoo, I think that's where we're going to get a much bigger bang in terms of co-marketing. So, Leslie's written the book, so we have that personalized aspect of it. San Diego Zoo is behind it, so they're going to be able to bring their marketing muscle to bear, and then we'll be marketing it as well. So, in that regard, having a customer or having a partner that has a huge reach like that becomes really good. But absolutely, if you can get your author known, then it makes everything easier beyond that. And Pip is now, Pip was really popular, so it sold a lot of copies, but it sold those copies 10 years ago. And so you're now in that zone where the customer base for Pip is 15 years old, which is really not our target demographic. So we are kind of caught in that zone. But again, Leslie's books are very, very popular, and we're able to reach out, and we've got quotes from Martha Stewart and all these sort of things that people that have been exposed to her books that enjoy them and they've seen them before. So we're slowly reaching out to those markets as well. So yeah, absolutely targeting.
Do you market to obviously the audience level? What's the age level for Pip?
Right now, we're assuming it's sort of 3 to 5. It's almost pre-reader.
So how do you market to those guys? You're marketing obviously to the parent, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's absolutely it. So it's a matter of it's a very much understanding your target demographic, which is mothers and fathers of newborns or young children, and trying to hit the sites that they go to. I mean, mummy blogs are big now. We're trying to get things reviewed, and you know, I literally sent out an email to all the young mothers that I know saying, okay, where do you get your information? Like, if you're going to buy an app, where do you get it? And we got lots of feedback in that regard, and a lot of it's just, you know, trial and error. You know, we're advertising in Today's Parent, we're hitting our Facebook contacts, and you know, we were on Good Morning America. Sorry, Good Morning America, Canada AM. We're trying to get on Good Morning America. We were on Canada AM 2 weeks ago with our product launch, and that was great, and we had a lot of people get good feedback from that. But we're being very cautious in our optimism in terms of knowing that it takes a long time to get that ramp, and you can go back and you can read these case histories, and you know, the big success from the iPhone when it came out, that flight control app. You know, you read up on that. It took them a year before they started going crazy with their sales. And I mean, I think it's a lot faster now. The rise and fall of apps today is a lot different than it was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
But it still takes a long time. And you have to be prepared for that. You can't just you can't go at it and say, well, I'm going to have one app and it's going to be successful. No, that's not
you're not nurturing a single application, because if you are, you're going to be dead pretty soon. Because as you said, I mean, every app has a natural peak and then a plummet towards zero. It's a race to zero ultimately, which is what happens. And that compressed, usually, you know, maybe there's a little bit of hang time a couple of years ago, but now there's no hang time at the top, is there? It's just like you're up and straight down, right?
No, not at all. Yeah. I mean, the beauty of casual gaming is that people, the barrier to entry in terms of people buying the app is very low. It's $1, it's $2. I'll just buy it, no problems. But also the barrier to deleting is very low. And the barrier to being bored is very, very low. So you can't expect your app to be in the market for very long, and you have to make sure that you continually follow it up with something else. And that's the beauty of books, is that, you know, we can bring out a lot of books, you know, one right after the other. There's a, you know, as I said, we've got 7,000 books under license. It's more than we can do in the next 10 years. So we can pick and choose and backfill with all those, and you know, it's not like we have to come up with a new game idea every month. So
that's what books are. So 7,000 books, and so this is purely volume, right? This is swamp the market with your product, and then by doing that, ultimately, and I don't think it's, you know, it's not like swamp the market with bad product. But just get as much product as you can out there so that you are everywhere and everything, so that people looking for children's books or certain books of a genre, you will be found, right?
Yeah, and the nice thing is that not all the books are targeted at, you know, 2 to 3 year olds. We have publishers that have complete ranges of book up into books for teen, you know, for young teens, and they're very, you know, fairly sophisticated books. I mean, at the end of the day, our niche is in illustrated content. So when you're talking about books, you really are talking about, when you start getting up into teenagers, it's more graphic novels and that sort of thing. But, you know, we've even looked at doing cookbooks and travel books and anything else that's interactive.
Brass tacks. Let's talk about the impact of your launch. Let's talk about where you landed in the charts. We've already alluded to the fact that you guys were a #1 app in the children's books category in iTunes. Go through your brag to me about how well Pip the Penguin did on launch.
Yeah, I mean, it did better than we thought. But it did. It went where we wanted to go. We hit #1 on the Canadian ebook charts. We were #1 on the ebook apps for 2 or 3 days. We got to #7 on the all apps. So the top downloads, we were #7 for a day. We dropped down to about #10 for the remaining of the week. We launched on a Tuesday, and I can't remember why we picked Tuesday, but Tuesday seemed to be the magic number. That was in Canada. In the US, we got to I'm reaching here, probably #20 on the ebook apps. And it was interesting because we didn't specifically market to Canada. We marketed to North America, and but I think, as we mentioned before, we got on Canada AM, and our feeling is that combined with the social media that we'd put together, which was a combination of Leslie McGurk's contacts, her Facebook, the Skyreader Facebook, my personal, we reached out to our employees, said, look, you got to start spreading the news. So, it wasn't surprising that we had a huge amount of hits in Canada, given that that's where our social media circles are. Yeah, so I mean, the download numbers, we're not going to tell you what they actually were. They weren't as much as we thought they were, and they were a lot less than we thought they would have been, given that we were number one. But everything's an education, right? And especially with ebooks, ebook apps, and we'll just call it ebooks. Everybody's talking about the Kindle and the ebooks and billions of dollars, but nobody will tell you their numbers. Like, nobody will tell you download numbers.
I'd have to think, Steve, that ebook results would be the same kind of hit and miss as going through the entire process of actually building out books, like writing a book and selling a book. Like in Canada, you sell 5,000 copies, you're platinum seller, right? Or 1,000 copies. And
yeah.
And I would have to say that it's probably the same feeling around this, is that many, like, isn't that true that they say many authors, you don't get, there are very few authors, they're corner cases, just like in the app world, where an author actually makes a lot of money writing, or makes a living out of writing. Most of the time it's your business card, or it's a stepping stone to something else. So I would say that, to go and find riches in a book world, even in the digital space, where the margins probably are a little bit better, distribution opportunities are greater, and red tape is down, it's a long shot to make $1 billion as a book writer, isn't it?
Well, absolutely, and I think that our strategy is not to produce 1 or 2 or 10 books. Our strategy is to produce the thousands of books and essentially become that digital publisher. So we're taking books from publishers, we're creating interactive content, we're putting them out as apps. Ultimately, we'll be putting them into our bookshelf. But yeah, we're not focusing on just one, because you're right. That one author is a long shot. Publishers don't, traditional publishers don't deal with one author. They deal with thousands. And we're going to be doing the same thing. Now, all that being said, is that you still have to get the app out there, and the 5,000, and again, it's there's nothing magical about it. There was a survey I read the other day saying that the companies that are successful, whether it's ebooks or whether it's apps or ebook apps, are putting about 30% of their development budget into marketing, and the companies that aren't making money are putting less than 30% in. So again, it's marketing 101. You got to spend the money to make the money. The problem that you have with books too, though, is Angry Birds, for example, and it's a bad example, but literally everybody in the world can play Angry Birds. The 5-year-old can play it, and the 95-year-old can play it. Pip the Penguin, while it's a great app and we're really, really proud of what we've done, is targeted at 3 to 5-year-olds. And so, obviously it's their parents and or their grandparents, but it's a very, very small demographic. So, Pip will hit this demographic, then we'll have another book, and we have to spread ourselves wide in order to cover the same audience that an Angry Birds type of app would cover.
Well, what about, I mean, I love this, because when you talk about market segmentation, when you're building applications for a market segmentation, you've got to always take that in consideration. And I love the fact that you went after Leslie McGurk. She has an established audience. There's even if it's been a number of years since the books were published and the audience has grown up, you're still going to get a kick as a result of the fact that you made it so interactive, and the fact that she has an established audience. But what I played with the application. I bought the book, and my kids play with it, and they're up in the upper range, but they are Woodbridge children, and I've hampered them with the Woodbridge intelligence. So therefore, they could probably be playing this until they're 10, just like me at 42. I find it very engaging.
Yeah.
What were some of the challenges that you had in the development process of this? Because it just seems like there's a game into a game into a game inside of this book, and it must have been a development challenge. Why don't you detail a little bit of the obstacles that you had to overcome in order to be able to build this out?
Sure. And you can look at the development, the challenges in a number of ways, and one is really just brass tacks. Apple has literally, call it 4 different devices now. They've got the iPhone resolution, they've got the iPhone 4S with the Retina, they got the iPad and the new iPad Retina. And I went into it saying to my guys, let's do this smart. We'll have one set of assets. We'll scale and everything else. But then you find out that really doesn't work, and you got little pixelation. So we end up going back to the graphic artist saying, okay, I need 4 sets of assets now, 1 for each device. And you have to accommodate that. And interestingly enough, when you're creating something like a book, and you'll see this in apps as well, is that the versions that they have on the phone are not the same as the versions that they have on the iPad. Different layout, different user interface. It's a different way of interacting with your user. So you have to go back now. So we don't even have an iPhone version right now. We're actually engineering that now. Because we have to downscale, so the buttons have to be a little bit bigger and they take up more real estate. And now you're talking back to the author and the illustrator, Leslie, and it's covering up more of her art. And so well, I don't like big buttons because I can't see the pictures. And absolutely, it's the right thing to say. But these are the things that we have to take into consideration. And it's stuff you don't really think about going in when you're setting up a development effort. You're sort of like, okay, I need my 5 coders and I need to do this and I got to compile and I got to QA and I got to do all this. And it's like all of a sudden, shoot, we need to start thinking about stuff at the other end. And I've talked to people that are, user experience designers, and they, well, what you need is a user experience designer. I was like, well, I'm a startup. I can't really afford a user experience designer, right? So you run into all these things. And what we've done with our development is we do an agile development methodology. We work in 2-week sprints. We're constantly revising things. And we pretty much revisit the book and the book experience every 2 weeks. So we run through, we get some things done, we look at it, and then we decide, okay, do we need to add more or less interactivity? And we keep bringing ourselves back to our core principles, which is immersion and interactivity. And we're trying to stay away from what my head developer calls bobblehead. We don't want to have things that are happening just for the sake of them happening. In other words, touch a flower and it squirts water. Well, is that relevant to the story? And does it make sense in the context of what you're doing? And if it's not, then it's just bobblehead. And it's one, I've chewed up resources doing it, and it's not central to the core of the book. So with Pip, what we did is we looked at it and we said, okay, he's opening up a cupboard. Well, the whole book is sort of about cleaning up. Well, let's have everything come out of the cupboard, and then you get to put the stuff back in the cupboard. And yes, you're interacting with it, but it's also core to the tenets of the book, and it's fun. And you still want discoverables and you still want this, but it's that constant revisiting, and it can become very frustrating because the guys are down there working with it and they're very proud of it. We keep advising our illustrators and our animators, say, what, we understand that you're proud of your work and we understand that you did a really, really good job, but I don't like it. And we're going to move that and that's coming out and we're going to put something else in again. And don't take that as criticism. It's, I changed my mind, right? And play testing, we found, was huge. We have to keep putting it in front of people and watch people interact with your app so that you see what they're doing wrong. Like we found that people, for example, on Pip, you have to open a flap. They'd start touching it. They would just be banging away at this flap, and we're like, well, just swipe it. They go, well, how did I know? I didn't know how to swipe it. So we had to add this little bit of interactivity where the flaps kind of flutter open. And then even more, if they haven't swiped it, we have a little hand that comes across and goes, why don't you swipe the flap open? And just little things like that you don't think about going in. And as a designer, you don't think about it at all until you put it in front of somebody that's never seen the app before. I gave it to my mom, and she just couldn't figure it out. And I'm like, Mom, it's targeted at a 3-year-old. She goes, well, what do I do?
But it's the curse of knowledge. It's because you're so close to it that it just seems obvious, and a lot of people, a lot of developers have that challenge, and the best UI and the best development process is one that it just seems intuitive, right? Like touch screens. And I use that example very often of my kids walking up to the television set and swiping to change channels, right? It's a natural, obvious choice based on their age and how often they've used the iPad. That's a natural way to do things. I hate it because I got fingerprints all over my television set all the time. You said something really interesting there, is that just in the iOS ecosystem around the devices that they got, certainly the smaller screens and the larger screens that Apple's developed, you guys are iOS based, but there's a whole world out there in Android and perhaps Windows 8 and BlackBerry, and you start to see, I talk to developers and they see revenue opportunities in those, but they also see a lot of pain: 200 different devices, multiple screens, multiple input mechanisms, challenges of amplified. That even just with one operating system in iOS, you're challenged with. Do you think about moving beyond iOS and into that Android space? And what are some of the things that scare you, or are you gung ho on that?
Well, we definitely have plans to go there, and I think as I mentioned, our plan is to take those 20 apps that we've got, and ultimately the hundreds of apps, and compress them down such that they're books inside a single app. So in doing that, the majority of my development effort is platform independent. So now I just have to take my bookshelf and take that to Android. And absolutely, we're going to go to Android. We're looking at BlackBerry. We're looking at HTML5 to come after the netbooks. Like, we're looking at definitely cross-platform. But it's very intimidating. And every time a new platform comes out, I'll get emails from my CEO and I'll get emails from our sales guys going, "What about the Kindle Fire? What about this? What about this?" And I keep pushing back and, okay, yes, Amazon's bringing out, the Kindle Fire is probably a bad example because absolutely Amazon's going to sell millions of them. But this device is coming out and we have to be on it. I go, you know what? Until I see millions
traction
of those devices being sold, why would I bother? And that's, it can be a little bit, it sounds rough, but yeah, I got to put my resources somewhere. So, we're definitely going after iOS. We're going to be on Android probably by the end of the summer. We'll have a Facebook version of the app that we can use for some of our plans downstream is to go more self-publishing. But yeah, we want to basically be able to allow, when we take our tool ultimately to the publishers, we want to let them be able to go anywhere they want. And so we need to be on every platform.
Yeah, it makes sense. What about as a good Ottawa boy, as a good Canadian, what about this Waterloo company called RIM? Do you think that this is going to be something that you are going to explore with their BlackBerry 10 and the QNX operating system?
Well, we have to. But at the end of the day, one of the things that I'm really hoping I can hang my hat on is the fact that they are now compatible. I'll say compatible with Android. And I know there's likely going to be performance issues depending on how they put it together. But yeah, I mean, we'll definitely be there, and it's a matter of measuring the popularity and the demographic of those devices once we get there. I mean, like I said, one of our massive realizations right now is when we designed PIP for the iPad. We know we have to do an iPhone version, but as we start digging down, we realize that a big part of children's ebooks is that 5-minute nanny thing. Here, play on this, and people don't carry around their iPad. An iPad is even though it's mobile is I'm going on a trip or I'm in the house and it's more limited mobility. Whereas be on the phone, it's like you toss your phone in the backseat, play with PIP for a while, and that. We have to be there. And so again, it's just a matter of, we'll have a list of the top 10 devices and we'll just start knocking them off. And we may end up going to Kindle Fire first, but we'll be at the playbook eventually.
Let me ask you this about strategy around that, because, when you hold up an iPad, I mean, it's a natural big screen. The experience is awesome. It's tactile. You got lots of finger play on this. It works very well. When you hold up an iPhone, right, you've got very limited space. I'm of the age now, spectacles. Gonna need some reading glasses at some point. You really the visibility, the ease of use is not so great on these devices for something like a book. If you've ever tried to read a book on this or play a game on this compared to the iPad, there's no comparison in the experience. Do you look at the iPhone as a mimic? Are you going to take PIP and all the books and mimic what you do on here? You said that you look at redesigning this a little bit differently, but do you recreate PIP on the iPhone, or do you create a version of it that is complementary to the tablet version, where it might be a game, it might be a portion of it? Like, have you thought that through? Because it's not the same experience, is it?
No, it's not. Although, one of the things that we have to then take a step back on is realize that, yes, it might be, I don't have big hands, but a lot of people, it might be intimidating for somebody with a thumb the size of my hand.
Yes.
To interact with a phone. But for a 3-year-old, it's not that big a deal, and they don't, they can see. But it definitely is a different experience. So our goal initially is to simply create a version of PIP that works on the iPhone, and bigger buttons, a little bit different experience. We have looked at situations where we have apps that would be on the iPad and then have a complementary, as you mentioned, a complementary version. I don't think that's where we are right now. Although we are, we have books from some of our publishers that are much denser in terms of reading information, like comic book type, and you'd have to totally redesign the user interface. You can put a full page on the iPad. On the iPhone, it would have to be scrolling, pinch to zoom. All of that type of interface has to change. But we're looking at basically creating the same experience on the phones.
All right, last question. Last question, Steve.
All right.
What happens? Like what you talked about it a little bit earlier. This whole it's not a debate, but when I look at the publishing industry, I think about HTML5. I think about native cross-platform HTML5. It's not a standard yet. The challenges are many. But it's gaining obviously some support and particularly in the publishing space. I don't know why newspapers would have apps anymore when you can have this shared experience across with HTML5. When you look at this, how does this play out for you? This this fight. It seems like an internal fight always about HTML5 versus native development for you guys. Well, you've got to be looking at this thinking, can we ease our pain by just building this, pull back on the interactivity until there's a standard, go with HTML5, forget this native stuff?
Yeah. Honestly, I've been looking at HTML5 probably for the last, in detail for the last 3 or 4 years. And every time I look at it, I come back with a different alternative that's better. And it's just never there.
It's not. It's not. Clearly, it's not there yet. But it is like, yeah. I mean, it was.
It depends on the experience you're looking for, right? So, we're developing in 2 different environments. One, we have our apps, and right now there is you couldn't do PIP in HTML5 and have the same experience. I mean, absolutely, you could replicate the functionality in HTML5, but you're not going to. The speed, the responsiveness just isn't there. Our authoring tool that we're building to actually help our create our books, we went to HTML5 and we said, okay, I want this in HTML5 because it gives me multi-platform. My developers came back and we can't, it's just not there yet. So we're actually developing in Flash. And, we made the decision literally the same week that Adobe dropped support for Flash in the mobile devices. But the reality is Flash isn't going away anytime soon, especially in the PC type environment, the desktop environment. It's not going away. And I'm not going to embrace, yes, you can do Gmail in HTML5, but I'm not going to do a full-up video, audio, animation editor in HTML5 today. It just, if I had 100 developers in 2 years, sure, I can do it. But I got to get there in 6 months. And so we're not there yet. So we do support, or we will support HTML5 in the next couple of months as an export format for our authoring tool. So our books will be available in HTML5, but it will be a downgraded functionality. Like on the iOS, on Android, I have a physics engine. I can actually, the stuff you're seeing in PIP where the boxes bounce around and they curve down, you can't do that in HTML5. So I'd either have to write my own physics engine or I'd have to just not do it. So there's just subtle little things like that don't allow you to go there. But absolutely, we are constantly, every couple of months we're looking at it again. So, okay, is it now? Do we go now? Do we go now? And
the answer is no,
for us,
so far.
The native experience we have to stay there. It's a much better experience.
And that's what I guess, I think for quick and dirty, like if you want to deploy very quickly across all platforms, it's always easy to say, listen, yeah, it's on iOS and there's a simple version through HTML5 available on all the other platforms. And then you can build those platforms up and start replacing the HTML5 experience and wait for it. I remember, we're old enough to remember the early Java days where people were building their own libraries. because Java was limited and there was no standards. But then when Java actually came out with their officially stamped sanctioned libraries, all that code that was written, there was a company in Ottawa called Sanga that had written hundreds of these classes, and they were all moot now because Java had gone in a completely different direction. You don't want to do that with HTML5. You don't want to create something that's based on something that isn't a standard that can change and fluctuate. So yeah, it's an interesting debate. I think in the publishing space, it's much more apropos to have this conversation than in the app space. But what you're doing is is a marriage of the app space and gaming, and oh, by the way, we publish these, but we're not just pushing out books.
And again, we are looking at it for supporting devices like netbooks. We'll do an HTML5 version on those. Our initial Windows penetration will be an HTML5, and then we'll have to then decide whether we go to a native app based on that, because it allows us to get there and then come back to your native.
Well, it's great for testing, right? To see what the market is on those applications. If you're getting a lot of traction, then you can say, okay, maybe Android isn't the best platform to be on, the next best platform. Maybe it is Windows 8. Maybe it's because so you'll be able to. It's great for market research, I think, as well, if you can do it quickly, without a lot of cost.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
All right, Steve, I have taken up so much of your time. Now's the time to plug Skyreader. Where should we send people to go to find out more information, to download stuff, to learn about you, to learn about your stuff?
Everything's on our website, skyreadermedia.com. We have, you have links to our Facebook page, our Twitter feeds. You can get to Leslie's sites from there. But everything you want to know is on that website.
There's also great links there to the CTV Canada AM interview with your CEO.
Oh, yeah, sure.
A bunch of I love the behind the scenes video that is up there about how during the development process. It's all on your YouTube channel. So it's skyreadermedia.com. Steve, man, I really appreciate you doing this. We did this in 2 parts. Internet failures everywhere. We won't point fingers, but you can point it at me. I can point it at you. But I really appreciate sticking through this. The perseverance is incredible. It's just very entrepreneurial of you. And I wish you all the best with Skyreader.
Well, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
We have been, as you know, we've been speaking with Steve, who is the CTO for a company called Skyreader Media. Go to skyreadermedia.com. And check it out and download the application. Their latest book, Pip the Penguin. Certainly, it's a very cool interactive book if you have children between 3 and 5, and if you're a 42-year-old Woodbridge, it keeps you entertained. Thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate it.
No
For you guys out there, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, I thank you so much for being a part of this, for listening in, for making it a part of your day. However often you actually come back to the site and listen to these things, it really means a lot. If you have any feedback, if you have a suggestion, if you have a company that you think should be on this app or on this show, if you have an app that should be on this show, or if you think you should be on the show, reach out untether@gmail.com. We will see you next time on untether.tv. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Rob.